Kanto was the world to those who played Gen 1 back in 1998, and when I say the world, I mean it, because at the time there were no such things as regions, no Hoenn, no Sinnoh, just a place called Kanto. Interestingly, most players in America weren't even aware of that name, as outside of Japan, the word Kanto is never mentioned in red, blue or yellow. If we take a look at the game manual, we can see in big letters the words world map. How far have we come? If this is all that there was, well, what a small world, right? But knowing the phenomenon Pokémon became, it was only natural that not only the number of creatures would increase, but also the places to find them. It was the year 2000 when we got our hands on Gold and Silver, and as the second anime intro says, it was a whole new world. But this time, we changed the word world for region. The Johto region is comprised of 7 cities, 3 towns, 20 routes, 22 landmarks and a battle facility in Pokémon Crystal, all of them with characters to interact with and a lot more Pokémon to battle and catch. This is what the world looked like in 2000, even though as I mentioned, it was the first time that we were introduced to the term region and generation. I remember playing Pokémon Gold with the same excitement as I played Red, exploring every single corner of the region before facing the Elite Four and the champion. Nothing would have prepared me for what I'd witness next, the Kanto region. Now that I think about it, it's nostalgia within nostalgia, a place where in this virtual universe, I left a mark through an avatar. What new things would I see 3 years after I became the champion in the shoes of Red? What challenges would I face as Ethan? This is where the biggest Pokémon fan dream was born, the ability to revisit a previous region within a new adventure. We have to take into account the limitations of the Game Boy and how in spite of the return to Kanto, we couldn't expect it to be as big and as complete as in Red, Blue and Yellow. But this doesn't mean that, at least in my case, I didn't get to see interesting elements. The place where Mewtwo was born and where we battled Blaine was no more, as the volcano destroyed the whole place, erasing every single trace of Mewtwo's existence and all the insane experiments carried out by Dr. Fuji. As for Blaine, the upcoming eruption forced him to move to the Seafoam Islands to continue with his duties as a gym leader. The fact that we got to face 8 gym leaders, each of them with both Generation 1 and 2 Pokémon, and that after conquering all 16 gyms, you got to fight yourself from the past with Pokémon as high as level 81, was definitely a sight to behold. All these elements and more fed a need to see this replicated in the next generation of Pokémon games. Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire came out in 2003, and with them, the hope of many to see both new and returning features. While the internet was gaining momentum, it was still not a big thing in most people's lives, and as a consequence not too many had a lot of information about these games outside of magazines, and having a limited amount of space for information, we weren't expecting to know everything there's to know. Honestly, I think this was a good thing, because you had more space for wonder, something we don't have anymore, as we're a few clicks away from knowing every single bit of information about games that aren't even released yet. This reminds me of that time when I completely avoided every single detail I could related to Pokémon Sun and Moon before it was released back in my college days, and it worked. I really enjoyed the exploration without the aid of any guides or spoilers. My point is that that's how I experienced Pokémon Sapphire, without any spoilers and still with the magic I felt when exploring the Gen 1 and 2 games. I finished the main story, and you might already know what I was expecting, to see Kanto or Johto. And I remember being really excited after becoming the champion, because when I restarted the game, I received the SS ticket and I thought, okay, this is it. I'm going back to Johto or Kanto to see these regions with new graphics, new Pokémon, but also familiar characters from the old good days. Instead, the ticket got me to the Battle Tower, the ultimate challenge for competitive trainers. I have no idea how it did it, because I've recently tried the challenge and I didn't even get halfway. But back in 2003, I was somehow able to beat the Battle Tower trainers 100 times in a row, and I thought I had to do this in order to get the reward of seeing the previous regions. But the only thing I got was a gold shield, proving that I had beaten 100 trainers in a row, and put it as a decoration in my secret base. Kanto and Johto were still out of reach. Hoenn was a vast region, and as the meme goes, it was too much water. And that's where my exploration would focus on, as there are a lot of diving spots that are connected and lead you to places you can just get to by surfing. With this in mind, I thought maybe one of these spots would take me outside the limits of Hoenn, and I would finally be able to reach Kanto or Johto. By the time I was experimenting with this, I finally got access to a computer with internet, and one of the first things I looked up were secrets about Pokémon Sapphire, and to my surprise, there was this place called Southern Island, a location that was completely out of reach with the exception of those with a special ticket given away by Nintendo. I don't think any video game magazine available in my country ever talked about the Eon ticket, so I knew that the game held more secrets, and I was right. I was well aware that one of the main criticisms of this generation was the lack of many classic Pokémon, but what I found was that there were sprites of missing Pokémon somewhere in the game. Articuno, Mewtwo, Ninetales, Persian, Celebi, all of them were right there in that cartridge I got in July 2003. This revived my will to find these elusive regions, as if all these Pokémon were programmed into the game, it was expected that there was a place to catch them, especially considering that past generations were incompatible with the Game Boy Advance Pokémon games. It made no sense to have Pokémon programmed that were completely unobtainable by any means. I came across many obscure websites with cheats and tricks on Pokémon games, and I found the answer to my question: how to get to Kanto and Johto. I don't remember exactly what you had to do, but as you may expect, it was something ridiculous like beating the Elite Four 100 times without saving. And after searching for other sources, images and videos in a time when YouTube didn't exist, I realized that Kanto and Johto were nowhere to be found. It was a sad realization. How is it that Pokémon Gold had Kanto, but Hoenn didn't have any previous region? The console was more powerful and the games had more storage. Not too long after that, I bought a magazine with news on the release of the remakes of Pokémon Red and Blue, and then I understood that the presence of missing Pokémon within Pokémon Sapphire's code was because these new games would be compatible with it. I was happy to know that I would be able to revisit Kanto, and I think I was really satisfied with the remake, especially with the inclusion of the Sevi Islands, a very basic remake compared to Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but way better than Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. There's still something within me that wants to go to the previous regions in Pokémon Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald, even if I was expecting such places to be smaller and with less content than the main region. But I guess I also wanted to see what had changed, what side quests I would be able to go through, and all these elements I had experienced in the Kanto region in Pokémon Gold and Silver. When Generation 4 arrived, I knew that Pokémon would never include a previous region in a new game ever again, save for Pokémon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Let's think for a moment that Ruby and Sapphire did have the option to explore Kanto and Johto. How would it have worked, considering that by the time you are the Hoenn champion, your Pokémon are already at around level 50? This was one of the main problems concerning having more than 2 regions besides the main one. I always thought that a good way to make this work would be to cap your Pokémon at a certain level. Let's say that during your main region adventure, your Pokémon are capped at level 50. Once you get to Johto, their max level can be 75, and finally for Kanto, level 100. Imagine you already have your 24 badges and have become the champion. Right after it, there could be a world tournament like the one in Black 2 and White 2, where you fight against the most powerful trainers of the 3 regions with Pokémon at level 100 in order to become the world champion, in a similar fashion to how Ash had to beat the champions of different regions to be the best. There was this quote supposedly said by Satoshi Tajiri, stating that he mocked people who asked Pokémon games to include all regions in one game, saying that it would become an unplayable monstrous game. This was completely false. There's no source that confirms that Satoshi Tajiri or anyone at Game Freak ever said that. In spite of this quote being false, it's true that Game Freak never attempted something like this, and as time went by, we realized the impossibility of this. Imagine Scarlet and Violet with access to Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, Sinnoh, Unova, Kalos, Alola and Galar. However, this fact didn't stop Pokémon fans from having Pokémon games with the ability to visit previous regions. An example of this is a ROM hack called Pokémon Prism, a modified version of Pokémon Crystal where you can visit old regions, but I'm sure that there are others that implement this concept as well. Nowadays, I can say with almost 100% certainty that there's no way Game Freak will make a Pokemon game with previous regions, as it happened with Pokemon Gold, Silver and Crystal, except for any Gen 2 remakes like Heart Gold and Soul Silver, or the rumored Let's Go Togepi and Wooper to stay faithful to what made the second generation incredible. And with the Dexit being a logical consequence of having 1025 Pokemon and counting, it's less likely to see previous regions included in a new game as time goes by. It's more logical that the developers focus on a single new and bigger region to explore, leaving previous regions for new remakes. Just take into consideration that Gen 1 has been remade twice, and there are currently 4 more regions yet to receive at least one remake, such as the case of Generation 5 and 7. What do you think about visiting previous regions? Was it something you wanted to happen at some point? Or were you happy with how Game Freak focused solely on the main regions of the games? Thank you so much for watching. I recently uploaded an EisenBerg about the legendary first-person shooter Perfect Dark for the N64. I would say it's the most complete Perfect Dark EisenBerg, but in reality it's the only EisenBerg on YouTube about the topic, so if you wanna check it out, go to the EisenBerg Experience channel. I would really appreciate if you subscribe. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and once again thank you so much for being part of this awesome community. See you in 2025.